another APIsec University webinar. Corey, thanks for joining me. It's nice to have you back.
Of course, always happy to be.
Yeah, I think we've had you a few times in the last month or so. This MCP stuff is clearly hitting a nerve out there, and so even though we did a session just a month or so ago introducing your course, one of the things that came out of that was we wanted to create an MCP workshop. We announced it, and Corey and I have been doing a few of these already, and it is massively popular, right? A lot of organizations are really trying to wrap their heads around this MCP stuff. What does it mean for security? And so, quick call out there: if you and your organization want to invite us in to do a talk about MCP security for your team, for your organization, we're going to pop up a link where you can request that. But what we wanted to do today was kind of take elements of that workshop and do it publicly, right? Because not everyone works in an organization where it makes sense. Thank you, Christine, for putting the link up. So it's right there at the top. You click that scrolling thing. If you can catch it, it'll take you to our form. But that's what we're going to talk about today. As always, great to see everyone joining from all over the world. Some familiar names, some new names. So thank you all for being here. Let's dive right in here because there is so much to cover when it comes to MCP. I'm still coming up to speed on it. We've got our expert Corey here. And so, Corey, we've done some of these workshops together, and it was kind of interesting. The one we did earlier this week, they kind of slowed us down, said, "Hey, are you going to cover what is MCP?" Right? And so maybe we'll start right there, right? And I'm gonna bop around some. These are all slides that come from Corey's course, and if you haven't signed up for his course, I highly recommend it. It is probably the best thing out there in this area. But let's just start at the basics, Corey. What the heck is MCP? And we'll use this
Yeah.
to start.
Yeah. So model context protocol, you break it down into the three parts. Models referring to the LLM. Context is referring to the memory, scope, and capabilities of the tooling and being able to connect it with an LLM. And then protocol is a communication layer. So this is just a standardized way for LLMs to communicate and interact with third-party tools.
Yeah, and so this is where I'm gonna throw a curve at you here, Corey, right? So these are some new slides I spent this morning. I'm still jet lagged from Thanksgiving trip, and I was like, "All right, let me see if I can dumb this down to where I really get it," right? And so I'm gonna give you a build here. So this is this is what I'm calling the real olden days, i.e., like a year or two ago, right? The API era. And so you'd have your app, right? Acme Bank mobile app that communicates through a set of Acme APIs to the back end, right? To do things like, hey, I'm Dan. I can prove I'm Dan. I've got a token. I've got credentials, and I want to transfer $50 from savings to checking. And so this is, I'm pretty sure I got at least this part right. All right. And what this means is there's a set of APIs that are very structured, right? They have certain permissions and capabilities, and the input's got to look just so, and the backend's going to know what to do with it. And if anything's out of whack, it's just going to throw an error or something. So far, so good.
So far, so good. Yeah. The only thing is, I mean, we say 2023. This setup has probably been going on for 15 years now.
Yeah. I should say up through, and it's not. Now I'm getting those high level of background noise. Huh.
Uh,
Let me. I don't know if Ring Central is getting very sensitive, but at any rate, you're right. And then, frankly, it's not up through 2023. It's today, right? It's still probably the dominant way.
yeah.
Thank you, Jesse. Okay, let's go to step two, which I'll call the AI era, which is also now the olden days because that's all the way back in last year. So it looks a little different, right? So you've got this app that is now communicating to maybe some sort of AI layer, right? That is then interpreting things and then calling an API and running it on the back. So this might look more like, hey, I'm the bank bot AI and I've got this service level token. And hey, Dan asked me to transfer $50. All right. Is this still fairly accurate? Are we on Is this a good representation?
Yeah, so maybe that bank AI could be in your account, a chatbot that has enough information to act in your behalf. And it was custom developed just for this bank and just for this one purpose. So yeah,
So, so in this case, the Acme Bank AI is built, developed, operated by Acme Bank.
yeah. And then, it's probably ChatGPT or some local LLM that's running to be able to do this, but it has everything custom developed to work with that bank's API.
Okay, so it's still kind of inside the four walls of our organization, right? So we control it, and but there's an extra layer, right? And every layer adds surface, adds new risk vectors, potential vulnerabilities. Okay, so now here's where it gets more interesting, and I'm more curious, like how close or off is this, right? So this is now the MCP era, right? And let me describe it and see what you think. Now we're not necessarily even talking about Acme Bank app, right? The source could be a user, it could be a third party app, right? Like you literally built an MCP in front of our app, right?
Yeah.
Like that was really eye opening. And if you haven't seen it, he does it live in the MCP course. And that user could be working through something like Claude, right? And say, hey, Claude, transfer $50 from my savings to checkings. And with MCP now, right, that AI could be integrated with all kinds of different things, right? And here I've got some sort of representation. It could be a file system MCP, the bank's own MCP, some third party MCP, shell commands, right? And if it's got to figure out, it's got to interpret that request, figure out what tool to use, how to inform that tool what to do, and so forth. And this might look more like, hey, I'm some sort of general purpose AI. It could be Claude or something. I've got some broad token. I'm connected to Dan's bank and Dan's email and Dan's all this stuff. He asked me to transfer $50. Okay, weigh in on this. Is this what's right? What's wrong in this depiction?
Yeah, I think this is fairly spot on. So, my only question is back on the user third party apps. Yeah, a user now, maybe more and more often as time goes by, they're working directly through their Claude desktop, Cursor, ChatGPT. They're using these LLM applications to perform actions. And so now up above where we were just using the mobile app on our phone, now we're using ChatGPT, now we're using Claude, and we can, instead of leaving that single pane, we can stay in that window and ask for certain actions to be taken. And so instead of leaving and going to my banking mobile app or any other application, I can do it straight from Claude desktop. And in that situation, I could say, transfer $50 from this account to that account. Claude will figure out the context based on the MCP servers and the tool descriptions, be able to say, this is the right tool to use, this is the right bank account. And then if you've already set up authentication with OAuth or something like that and it has your credentials, then it's going to go through that full process of acting on your behalf by logging in as you with a token that represents your account and then perform the actions from there.
Yeah, so I'm trying to wrap my head around, like, one of the big things that MCP brought was, and I think you got a slide in here somewhere. It's sort of, I can't find it, but it's like instead of having to like integrate individually to all these separate things, there's sort of this translation layer or normalization layer of
Yeah.
all those disparate things that I just got to speak one language and all those systems will know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. One of the things I've been saying, and I say in the course, is MCP for me feels a lot like APIs that work with LLMs. And so MCP is not going to be the only type of API. There will be others. So we can think of MCP like REST or like GraphQL. And it's just one of the protocols that's in place to enable this to happen. And it's open for anyone to use.
And the history here is it comes from Anthropic, right? They're the ones who created this thing, and
Yep.
It's not unique to Anthropic, right? Like, it's not like it's an Anthropic proprietary
No, it's
platform.
open source. Yeah.
And I was reading something like, OpenAI and whoever else, like they're at least so far, they haven't introduced competing or differing kinds of MCP like or integration layer standards, right?
Yeah. So I've heard that, yeah, there are some upcoming competitors, but right now everyone has embraced MCP.
Well, and so one of the things I'm reading about this is they built MCP to solve a problem, right? Like it's getting, there's all these things cropping up everywhere. We need some USB stick to like, make it easy for folks to integrate. But security wasn't really front of mind, right? Like authentication and permissioning and that kind of. Is that true?
Yeah. And again, going back to the API comparison. So, like, REST APIs are released, and it's just a common form of communication that enables a lot of activity to happen and business opportunities. But just like APIs at the time, security isn't at the forefront. Security is catching up to that.
Yeah, and so we're going to go through some examples here to go through that. But let's just all right, reflecting on this thing, right? You saw that in the real olden days, the API era, it's pretty simple, right? 3 steps, very concrete, very structured. Then, all right, we're adding a fourth step, and that fourth step, what's kind of interesting with the AI layer is it's not structured, right? Like APIs are very structured. It's got to look a certain way. You've got to have certain permissions and everything's got to be just right. Now you got this AI layer that's just like, hey, I can talk to it in natural tones and it's gonna do its best and it's not always perfect. And now there's this like interpretation layer, right? A lot of murkiness. And then you just look at that third layer. Now there's all kinds of things and judgments being made and tool selection and all that. And so you have this in the course, you talk about it, right? Like the trust boundaries or the surface area, right? Like let's talk about this. Like all of this goodness comes at a cost.
Yeah. Yeah, that's accurate. And so, where there's a big divide between my comparison with APIs and LLMs is LLMs are not deterministic. They're probabilistic. And so they are operating off of vector databases, trying to be helpful by predicting the next word or words to use in order to help. And so there's a, a lot of gray areas for how to wrangle that in and put boundaries around it to be able to protect it. But what's happened here with MCP is now we have a lot more of those gray areas to deal with as far as LLMs go. And so we have a lot more trust boundaries to manage.
Yeah. And those boundaries they have, like you said, it's probabilistic. So, it sounds like the security becomes even also more challenging, right? It's not quite as black and white as it used to be, which probably wasn't even that black and white to start with.
Yeah, if I mean, one thing I've been thinking about is your organization were to have malicious software that an employee downloaded and installed, an antivirus would flag it and it wouldn't allow you to maybe even download it. It wouldn't allow you to install it or run it. But a malicious MCP server, if that's permitted in the network, it's not going to be flagged by any antivirus.
Yeah.
The malicious side is going to be likely on or related to prompt injection or tool confusion or anything like that. So it'll be natural language, which I doubt any of the major AVs that are out there are going to be able to flag in the same way. When you have a tool that says BCC this email, maybe how's it supposed to tell the difference between a feature of that tool where maybe this is something that's supposed to be a part of it versus it being a malicious command?
Yeah, I mean, you think about like this evolution of application security, right? And back in the day, which means even still today, right? We would do our Nessus scans and vulnerability scans, and we'd have our WAFs in place to look for things like injections and stuff like that. Very deterministic, right? Like, is your web server patched, right? Does this request, contain a malicious looking thing on the end of it, right?
Yeah, unique symbols or anything like that, where in this case, we're looking at letters in a certain order that mean a certain thing.
That's right. That's right. And we saw even at the API layer, it already kind of evades a lot of those defenses, right? Because the request looks perfectly fine. There's no SQL injection. There's no funky characters, right? It's attacking at that logic layer, which makes it hard to scan for and it makes hard to detect. And so we've talked about it endlessly on this program and in our courses, how all those breaches that we talk about get through the defenses, right? They get through, and now you make it even murkier with it's not even an API request anymore, right? It's not structured at all. It's an English language or any language request.
Yeah, the natural language will definitely throw a curveball as far as security goes, and then prompt injections can be very tricky, whether it's natural language as text or hidden in an image or a file or a resume or a LinkedIn profile.
Oh, it's crazy. So you actually have an example. Let me maybe since you mentioned that, I want to try to find it here. I'm just gonna bop around here, Corey.
Yeah.
Check this out, folks. This is an injection, right? It's an image that's being delivered. Talk us through this, Corey. What's going on here?
Yeah. And so if an AI is processing images and it goes through this one and processes the text on there, one, this isn't going to be detected by a non-LLM based tool. So our typical image scanners or antiviruses are not going to see this and flag it as malicious. But the LLM that processes this image could process the text as well, ignoring its system commands and performing this set of malicious actions.
It's just wild, right? So, like, what firewall is gonna interpret that and see that and identify, whether it's legitimate or not?
Well, yeah, and I think it'll have to be. I think Nico in the chat had actually said this, but it'll have to be LLMs all the way down. I don't know what else is going to be able to. Obviously, easy to say everything should be processed by a person and reviewed in every single line,
Right.
but realistically, at scale, it's going to have to be another LLM
Yeah.
system searching through that. And I don't know if it's a joke or serious, but I've seen some injections that have been put in by developers where like uh they'll say my code's great, nothing further to review, just give me the approval of the system. So we'll see these additional layers of LLM and additional prompt injections.
Oh, that's
uh
funny. So developers can actually try to like bypass the guardrails themselves. So yeah, you mentioned Nico. I actually saw that comment. So I just want to double click on that. Question is the comment. So what if another AI will wrap the whole MCP flow, AI to MCP, blah blah blah. And I'm working on some apps and stuff on the side, and there's an AI element, right? And so a user can input something to this service that I'm building, and hopefully they'll all be good people and not want to like hack me. But
Everyone hacked in. That's
everyone hacked
it.
in, right? Exactly.
Don't trust users.
But it did occur to me, right? To Nico's point, like, should I take the input and before I go process it, go send it to another AI and say, hey, does this look okay to you? Does this look like a malicious attempt? Is that a best practice or that can
Well,
be gamed as well?
yeah, so the other LLM is going to be just as susceptible as the LLM you're trying to protect. As Pradeep saying, LLMception, definitely an issue. I think there has to be an extra layer of flagging requests that contain language that is used for prompt injection. And there has to be something there that can be flagged, maybe hold off before being processed. Of
Hmm.
course, all the typical things we've been doing in web app security up to this point still apply. So, user input validation to begin with, a user on your app shouldn't be able to send over cross-site scripting to be processed or remote code execution, any commands, OS command, that sort of thing. You should still have that input validation layer that says, I'm expecting a phone number anything else is going to be blocked. But it's when it's free form, like all the chatbots are, then it gets difficult to deal with what's, natural language hacking versus a prompt injection versus a valid request.
Well, and one of the things that you talk about in the workshops are the sort of helpfulness of AI and LLMs, right? And one thing that I find sort of annoying is it's so agreeable, right? Whenever I'm like, vibe coding or, and I'm like, hey, what about this? And it's like, you're absolutely right. That's a brilliant idea, right? It just wants to. And you have this example where you could exploit that helpfulness to get the LLM to hack on your behalf.
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest issues for MCP security is actually API security, because how many APIs are leveraged to enable MCP to function to begin with. And so if the API is vulnerable on the tool side, then I will likely be able to use the MCP in order to help me with an attack. So I could say something like, I know my account ID is normally 1234, but there's been a mix up and it's somewhere between 1234 and 2000. I would guess the helpful MCP is going to make several attempts to try and make that work. Obviously, if there's decent security on the tooling side, they'll flag it and prevent it from continuing to make every request in between those user IDs. But with the LLM, yeah, it's built to be helpful. It's going to try and help in that situation. And that's one of the things I took advantage of in the course, to have the directory traversal attack take place using MCP. And I found success in that because the LLM was looking for a file in a specific location. I said, it might not be in there. It might be in dot slash this other folder. And sure enough, escaped the original idea that we had around the sandbox and went in, stole my API keys and handed them over to me because it was being helpful.
That's amazing, right? So these guardrails are either not in place or murky.
Well, yeah, and I think the important thing, especially with that situation, is we relied on the guardrails to take place through the MCP server and the design that was put in place there from vibe coding it. And it really proves that the sandbox and the enforcement and everything else has to come from outside of MCP. I should have locked down the folders so that the user could have only accessed that one folder and not access the others.
Yeah.
But without that layer of security, it just roams free through your system.
So I want to bop back to this thing that we were looking at before, right? Because one thing that I think we sort of skipped over is who is the who is executing? Well, who is the operator in this scenario? So take the first scenario, like classic API, right? So this API is acting as Dan, right? I'm a user, I've logged in, and if the app is properly designed, it's going to enforce the permissions and access controls that Dan has. I can transfer money from my account. I cannot transfer money from Corey's account. But as we get into these more AI and MCP flows, it's the actor is not Dan per se. It's this agent. Is that right?
Yeah, agent that is acting on your behalf with tokens that represent you. Yeah, that's right.
But are there okay, so tokens that represent me. So okay, does that mean I'm good? Like, or the system is good and there's not a worry that the agent is going to say, oh, well, you know what? He's asking to access to transfer money from Corey's account. I'm trying to be helpful. Does like where is that control plane enforcing? Like at APIs, it's like, all right, Dan has a certain role, certain permissions. That's pretty strictly enforced as long as the logic is right. Is it just as equally structured and strict in AI land?
So that'll happen the Claude ChatGPT level, where you're setting it up and providing credentials there, or you have environmental variables and you're setting it up over there at the server level. But it will have the context of the user that it's working with, and it will only be able, well, in a, we sort of have the ideal world all the way through, because back at the top example, that's an ideal security situation, but we've seen plenty of bank APIs go wrong where I can steal a token or increment the ID and get access to someone else's bank account, any of those things. So with it ideally locked down below, it would act on your behalf and only perform a limited set of actions. But the permission level for that is happening at the LLM application level. So Claude Desktop, ChatGPT, Cursor. And so you provided the credentials, it performs likely an OAuth flow to be able to go back and forth and prove that it's you, and it should be able to log in and then get a token at the end of that flow, and then be able to perform those actions with those tools. And so back at the application level, we need to ask, and I think it's great that you brought up a banking one, because I'm comfortable with the olden days and the real days, the other olden days, maybe not so much there, but I'm not connecting to my bank account. That's for sure. I don't have that risk appetite. And so I think it starts there with the user to say, do I want to be able to do this with my chat? And if something goes wrong, am I okay with that? And so here, when you're setting it up, you'll authorize it per action, and you can, I do in the course, but you can see the accept one time only or accept always. And so if you're accepting always and then it's performing actions that I would consider dangerous, transferring funds, looking at account history, that sort of thing, you have to determine what you're comfortable with it doing in the first place. And so I give the example of Monday.com. I use that to manage tasks across different pen tests and across different teams. And with that, I'm able to connect it to Claude Desktop and say, create a new task for this. And it can have a whole workflow where it can create those tasks and assign those to the right people and everything else. But do I want that to be able to delete tasks? Probably not, because if something goes wrong, it deletes all of my Monday.com tasks and I'm left off with, none of the work that I put into it. And so I would limit the permission to begin with and then be careful about the apps that I'm using to start. I wouldn't connect this to my bank account. I don't connect it to my emails. And maybe I have a lot less risk appetite than others that are more anxious.
You've been on the front lines, you know what's doable. But what's interesting there, and wow, awesome to see Darren in here. Thank you for joining. And I'm definitely going to hit your topic, because your comment, Corey, was like, "Hey, these agents are going to perform some authentication, get a token, and kind of act on your behalf, right?" But to Darren's question, how many APIs use API keys and not OAuth? An API key is not me. How many APIs use on behalf of? In reality, AI agents are being given super tokens, which is a recipe for disaster. And so, if I understand Darren's question, what you described relies on the app being, or the AI being properly developed, and it's going to truly act on your behalf, and it's going to literally impersonate you with your token and your credentials and your rights and permissions. But does that happen in reality?
Yeah. I mean, that's a completely valid point. Over on the tool side of how access is given is completely flexible. So if an API key is leveraged or OAuth or some other form, that's a completely valid situation where now you're using API keys. It doesn't necessarily represent you. It's something that could be lost, something that could be manipulated or forged. Plenty of
Yeah, I
examples.
mean, this is a wild west, and maybe that's a good segue to talk about some of the things that can happen here. So let's walk through a couple of examples here. It is a wild west, and the breaches are starting to happen. Can you walk us through what happened here? I mean, I think what we're talking here is like trust. So one of the tools I've been using lately is N8N. It's really cool. It's like Lego blocks for building apps. And I don't know, a week or so ago, they introduced their own MCP, right? Which is great. Now I can have my vibe code, know what's going on in N8N, and that's all wonderful. But their MCP only has read access. It can also like execute, but it cannot write, right? There's no write access. But sure enough, there's another MCP that somebody made that does everything, right? And my vibe code even said, "Oh, why don't you use that other one?" And I'm like, "I'm not sure I want to do that."
Yeah, the robots are asking for more power. And please give me the one that doesn't have restrictions on it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so the postmark MCP here, this was a supply chain issue that involved the prompt injection that I mentioned earlier, so stored prompt injection. And what had happened was I believe, 15th version of the postmark MCP was issued with one small change, which was it added a line that said, whenever you're emailing, because the function of this is to like review emails and send them out, something like that. I don't know. And the developer had added in, whenever you perform that action, BCC this email. And like I said, with static code analysis, maybe if this is the only single change and you're thorough and you have a good process, maybe this will be flagged, but it's not going to be because of the content, because there's nothing malicious with this specifically. But from a natural language perspective of an LLM interacting with it, okay, yes, this is completely malicious. A user is going to be BCC'd the email every single time that this takes place and every single time that it's used. And so this was an issue in the supply chain where this was pushed out and people updated their software, they used this, and it sent it affected over 1,500 people, and those emails included all sorts of sensitive information, API keys, and everything else. And so this is where it gets challenging to where we're not seeing strange symbols that represent cross-site scripting attack or remote code execution. We're seeing natural language commands that align with the functionality of this MCP server.
Well, and I mean, I don't know if this one was an open source or what, but there was somebody like contributed a change to the server that had this extra line of code in there that now BCCs their private address, and it got downloaded, installed with thousands, tens of thousands of times, right? So just goes back to that, do you trust this server?
Which you could have. I mean, based on everything we've known about this, the previous 14 versions didn't have same malicious attack and they were usable and everything else. So it's this 15th version with a supply chain issue.
Yeah, and let's just talk about trust, right? So anybody can go create an MCP, right? You shared some articles with me this week. There's now over, I don't know, X thousands or tens of thousands of MCPs out there, which frankly sounds like that'll be the quaint old days, right? I bet there's going to be hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of MCPs. Are there like directories, marketplaces? Like where would you go
Yeah.
to sort of vet, is this
Mhm.
something I want to trust or not?
Yeah. So there's MCP registries, and you can think of those similar to the App Store on an iPhone or something like that, where these have been checked, they've been validated, and there's an additional layer of trust there, knowing who it was developed by and where it's hosted. And so with MCP servers, these could be a random account on GitHub that says this is for Microsoft Outlook, something like that. And so in that situation, I would go to a source that has Microsoft as the organization that's responsible for it. So
Sure.
in the course, I used the Docker MCP store as a valid location to download from.
Indeed, right? So in the example I was giving on N8N, there are probably N number of publicly created MCPs, and then there's the one from the source, right?
Yeah.
So definitely a good practice there. I know there's some questions in here. Jesse commented on which one was that that you were recommending here. Here's from Mark Edwards. NPM package likely corrupted via the shy halud worm, which is still ongoing. Do you? I don't even understand your question, Mark. Does that make sense to you, Corey?
Yeah, there's been a lot of news about this Shia worm with NPM pack, but no, I don't have any update there.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Nico Vargas again. We haven't eliminated broken authentication yet, but here we are going, giving keys to AI, not knowing how they will fully behave. Yeah. I mean, I guess history repeats itself, right? The MCP came out to solve a really important problem, and as usual, security is trailing behind. And in fact, to that point, here's the probably the one of the most impressive breaches that there is, and it's really like at the tooling level, right? This isn't an MCP that was improperly created or designed or has malicious code in it. It's that sort of control layer or integration layer that had a flaw in its own operation that allowed remote code execution. What walk us through what happened here with MCP remote?
Yeah, so mcp-remote had an issue with the URL that's used for OAuth, and an attacker was able to inject that with PowerShell commands to perform a remote code execution and gain system access. I believe it was 9.5 or above,
Yeah.
yeah, on the CVSS. And so, valid issue that affected over 500,000 downloads. And these are just things like the early days of APIs where you could see IDORs and BOLA vulnerabilities all over the place, and organizations caught on with like locking down incremental IDs and making sure authorization was enforced, even though we still see plenty slip through. But it was a much more prominent issue. And so seeing remote code execution fairly early on in the deployment of this, it's just one of those like 3 steps forward, 5
Yeah.
steps.
Well, and MCP remote, like here's a diagram from the article, right? So you've got your client, right? That's you, right? MCP remote is some sort of like proxying bridging layer that is very widely used. And then that's what's connecting out to the outside world. And this outside world could then leverage a flaw in MCP remote to basically append these remote, these code execution shell commands in the handshake. Is that more or less right?
Yeah, that's accurate.
So MCP remote that's just like the, I mean, is that just sort of like one of the standard elements that people use? It's just kind of like the pavement on the road that we're using.
Yeah, I'm not too sure on MCP remote specifically, but yeah, this taken advantage of at the untrusted MCP server layer. And it was a part, I believe, of the OAuth authentication flow, where I mean it's something we've been using, and in that flow, the URL that's provided, that's where you could take advantage of that as an attacker and provide that malicious.
Yeah, so I think it just is sort of highlights like we are in these early days where, even the stuff we think is rock solid and we're building around, even that stuff can be flawed and have issues. So we're already, well into to this hour here, and I want to make sure everyone, if you've got questions for Corey, make sure you pop them in here. I want to pull up a few more of your slides from the workshop, and by the way, I've updated the little banner at the top. Quick shout out: in 2 weeks from today, we're going to host our last webinar of the year, and what better way to do it than to have kind of our final breaches webinar, and we might have to make it an extra long one because there are so many examples. I don't know if y'all read about the WhatsApp API breach from this week, 3.5 billion with a B records exposed here. So some crazy stuff, but come sign up for that. It's going to be a fun session. I'm sure we'll have some fun announcements. And while I'm on the topic, we are also I think today or tomorrow is the last day for nominations for the ASPY award, the API Security Person of the Year award. We have had tons of amazing submissions. So if you know someone who deserves it, you think yourself deserves it, get those nominations in. There are way too many. We're gonna, condense it down to a handful and then open up voting. We'll have public voting in the next week or two, but get your submissions in. But let's come back to this. MCP's three superpowers. What are they? And let's talk about what the implications are of those.
Yeah, so the main thing that was solved here by MCP is AI isolation. Before, we're using Claude Desktop or ChatGPT, and it's great at conversations and answering questions, maybe a hallucination every now and then, but it's not so great at performing actions. Those back in the early days, a year ago, before MCP, those had to be integrated individually. And so when there's an update to the software or the API, then that has to be updated and fixed. And it sort of creates this sprawl if you are going to have your LLM be able to perform actions. And so MCP helped with adding resources, pretty much a common way to be able to interact with resources, tools through prompts. And so now there's the context with the servers and the tool descriptions to be able to have the LLM go and find the right tool to use with the right action to perform, and then have the context of the API to be able to interact with those tools and retrieve resources and make changes.
And let's touch on. I love this from your course, the 5 layers of pain. This is a Corey concept.
That's right. Yeah. So these are the different layers where things can go wrong. So we saw those trust boundaries beforehand, and this is just a breakout of that. So there could be what is it? There be dragons here. So there's all sorts of malice that can take place at all of these layers, whether it's from the user to begin with, that the user is malicious and trying to perform a prompt injection, or like I had said, they're trying to leverage the MCP to hack the API. That would be at this host or MC. Yeah, that would be at the client layer. And so token theft, all of that is going to be an issue at the MCP client layer. So how are we trusting our credentials to be stored and transferred here? Very important when it comes to using the API keys that are in place. That OAuth flow, at the end of that OAuth flow, a token is handed off to represent you. So yeah, how you're storing and rotating keys, all very important considerations at the MCP client layer. Transport, of course, so we have standard input output for local MCP servers, and then HTTP and streamable HTTP for remote. And so the same problems come up here with man in the middle attacks and making sure your data in transit is encrypted. Common things that we've been considering for the past 20 years,
Yeah.
but now applied to MCPs. And then the servers themselves. So you download a malicious MCP server, and then you have that BCC prompt injection that's included where you have to review what's in that MCP server, the actions it's taking to see if there's an issue there. And then the external resources. So this is where we get into supply chain issues, tool hijacking, issues with the databases, the APIs, and the file systems.
Yeah, and what I love that you did in the course, I think you're just like leading the way again for us. I know there's an OWASP project that's formed.
Yeah, the
And it's
Cloud Security Alliance has their own top 10 list, worth checking out for sure.
okay. Okay.
This is one that I released, and then the OWASP is in active development, version 0.0 still, I believe.
I don't know how you could be publishing things, even concepts, but yeah, it's still 0.0.0 version. But at any rate, like, you know what? I like Corey's version. You've put a lot of thought into this. You've got incredible expertise in history. And some of these are well known to us. And frankly, mostly we don't have time to go through all this. We're going to have to do future sessions that really dig into one or two of these at a time, just like we did in October for the API OWASP. But some things that are that stand out here, I think in the course you go through about 4 or 5 of these things. Like, maybe just pick 1 or 2 that you think are especially relevant, that are hot on your radar screen.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go for more on the fun side. Tool confusion is interesting because one, it could be accidental. It doesn't even have to be malicious for an attack or incident to take place because at the MCP server level, the LLM is going to have the context based on the tool descriptions there. So if you overloaded an MCP server to perform every action possible for Jira and maybe for some other help desk ticketing software, maybe you have a personal ticketing software where you have your to-do list and you have your enterprise level Jira that has confidential data. The LLM, if you're leveraging it for that, may confuse those two tools and perform the wrong action and send your confidential data to somewhere it doesn't belong. And so the MCP server and the LLM could get confused based on having too many similar descriptions, and it just selects one probabilistically, and hopefully it's the right one. So that's something that, an attacker could do, but also the LLM could be confused because of too many options to begin with.
Yeah, and you could see how this happens, right? When you start plugging into all these things, and now you're relying on that AI layer to make a judgment, right?
Yeah.
And
And so when I vibe coded the APIsec MCP server, one of the choices you have to make when you have API documentation and you're building it is, do I want this to have access to everything to begin with? And if you're developing MCP servers, the answer is probably not. You probably want to focus on the capabilities that are going to add the most benefits to your users to begin with.
yeah, it's crazy, right? Code used to be very black and white. That's why I'm not a coder. I wasn't good enough at making it perfect, right? And getting every last character exactly right. And now it's so there's all this non-deterministic. It's going to try its best. It's going to make decisions that you might not even be aware of. I mean, in my own vibe coding, you could put your own guardrails in. I'm like, do not hard code API keys. And then it will say, oh, got it. Not going to do that. And 5 minutes
Oh, yeah.
later, that's it. One time I checked in code to GitHub and it was like, hey, by the way, you have hard coded API keys. I'm like, thank you, GitHub, for letting me know that.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the right things looking out for you, man, those bad things are going to sneak on through.
Yeah. And as Mark is saying over in chat, like developers don't think this way. They want to open it up to everything. And that's going to potentially lead to the tool confusion. Or, I mean, what it's really doing is offloading security and saying, not our problem, it's the end user's problem. And
Yeah.
the end user is going to say, yes, I want this to do everything. And then they're going to run into issues over on their side.
You talk about it somewhere in here. I don't know if I have it handy. The permission fatigue, right? Like, haven't we all been there? Like, especially in vibe coding, right? It's like, do you want to allow? Do you want to allow? Like, over and over. Eventually, you're just like, screw it. Yes, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and that comes there's, phishing attacks that rely on fatigue, and they'll spam a user until the user just says, "Fine, I don't care what this is, just stop messaging me," which is horrible, that shouldn't work, but the same thing happens here in MCP where every single time you perform an action, it will ask you, "Do you authorize this?" until you click the easy button right below it that enables permissions always, and then, you're over provisioning.
And I promise to let you go on time here, Corey. But let's just grab one more question here. Charles Lane, great question. To this whole like tool selection issue, can you proactively define which tool to use for what? Is this a guardrail you can actually implement?
Yeah, so you can do it on both sides. One, in the development of the MCP server, to the vibe coding way, which is probably more professional, better ways to do this, but the vibe coding way is to connect the API documentation to build out the server. And so to begin with, you can remove those actions that are not necessary to begin with, or maybe your application doesn't flourish within LLM where it has to process a ton of data to perform a simple action. It's probably not the best user experience. So you can remove those security concerns and UX design issues up front on the server side. On the user side, you also control the permissions there. And so if you use the Jira MCP server, for example, and you integrate that into Claude Desktop, you'll see 20 to 30 actions that you could take advantage of, or you can go through and disable the ones that you're not going to use.
Well, and from Randall, agents.md file still being ignored. Is that a kind of a file that you might use to establish some of these rules and policies?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of context for that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, yeah. There you go. I did update the little button at the top. Let's wrap here. A couple of announcements. So AppSecCon is coming back in February, and so please come join us. If you want to speak, hit us up. We've got a speaker submission form, and I'm sure we're gonna have and want to recruit a lot of talks around MCP. Frankly, Corey, these sessions that you and I have been doing, if anything, it's not getting more crystal clear. It's expanding my brain on like how big this cloud is of confusion and potential. And so we're gonna need to do a lot more here. And thank you as always for what you do.
of course. Yeah, the same thing goes for this vulnerability taxonomy. I mean, this thing is ancient in the realm of AI as it's, 1 month old at this point. So I'm sure this will change and evolve with time. And, maybe we'll have a dedicated session or a course on OWASP once that release is. And, yeah,
Yeah.
things are constantly changing. This is all new. MCP is happy birthday 1 year old at this point.
Yeah, no kidding. We should celebrate. Well, let's wrap here. Thank everyone for being here. This was incredibly enlightening. Always got a couple of little plugs. This is why we're able to do APIsec University for free. Do all these things. We make it all the courses freely available. We're not in the business of education. Our business is around application, API, LLM, MCP security, right? So please come hit us up if this is something that's an important topic to you. We've got a really incredible, very sophisticated technology that tries to pressure test your applications in ways and at speeds and coverage that really you can't get to from a manual perspective. And we have a new tool that we're really excited about called Bolt. We know one of the big challenges, especially you pen testers out there, red teamers, you don't always get handed documentation. So where do you start? So we built this thing. It's currently in beta, and we'd love for you to try it out. We'd love to get your feedback. How do we make this even better and stronger? But literally fire it up in your Chrome browser. It will watch your traffic. It will look for those API endpoints. It will even spit out an OAS for you, right, and get you off and running. And of course, it integrates beautifully into the testing tool that we offer. And of course, you can do what you like with those specs as well. So little shameless plug, but hopefully you'll come try it out. It's free, it's standalone. You can just do what you like with it. And with that, Corey, big thank you. I know you're off to Paris next week, so have a great time at Appy Days. Wish I was going with you.
Yeah, the Hacking APIs conference, Paris is a week from today. So if you're out there, stop by and say hi. We have an amazing line. Yeah, all sorts of great speakers, including Chris Roberts and many others that'll be out there.
Amazing.
It's going to be a huge hit. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want passes or something, I'm sure we can hook you up. You just got to get yourself to Paris. That part we can't help you with. But but yeah, I think it's probably the last time we have you on the show here, Corey. So, happy holidays to you. Big thank you to you, your lovely wife, Kristen, who, is amazing and I'm sure supports you and Happy Labs in all kinds of great ways. And what a year for Happy Labs, right? Let's give it a little shout out for Happy Labs. You started at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, started up in March. At Happy Labs, I provide cybersecurity consulting, penetration testing. We've done a lot of work in mergers and acquisitions for technical due diligence. So it's a great niche where we can help out to make sure the acquisition that you're going after is secure or maybe not so secure and needs additional attention up front. In addition to that, next year we're releasing continuous pen test partner. And so you can have our team testing your attack surface throughout the entire year. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you want to hear more about that.
Yeah, please do. Corey's the man. You can't get anyone better. And if you're looking for those end of year CPEs, we got you covered here. So just fill out the form. We do check that you are here. But yeah, really super grateful to all of you for being big supporters of everything we do, showing up. And we got one more session this year, so look for that. Come join us, and I'll just put the where the heck is that, Christine? Maybe you can put that. Here it is. Come join us. Sign up for the last webinar of the year. We're going to cover a bunch of pretty eye-opening breaches, and probably make some fun announcements as well. A lot of people ask, "Are we going to do Cyber Friday, Monday, whatever the hell?" We are, but just stay tuned for news on that. And with that, so long, everybody. Thanks for being here. Thanks again, Corey.
Thanks. Yeah.
See ya.